I understand that there's frustration in the locker room, in the coach's room, with the fans, everybody. I get that. But I'm going to be the one who's going to be positive.
What's up, Chop Shop community? It's your boy F-Tank58 here with another banger. And I got my bro with me, James Piercey. What's good with you, bro?
Chilling, man. Excited to talk about the Rockets as always. How you doing?
And I'm good, man. New year, new me. That's my motto.
Every year, man.
Speaking of New Year's and new me's, obviously we've seen all the things that have transpired for the Rockets in the past few days. Being kind of heightened by the Eric Gordon deal with the no improvement thing. And you wrote an interesting piece that I really loved. And obviously, if you guys aren't aware, James is a writer. He works for multiple outlets, but the main primary one is through the Dream Shake on SB Nation, and he just dropped an article titled, and it's going to be in the description of this video and the podcast if you're listening to it. Can the Rockets turn this thing around? And this is going to be the point of our conversation today, because me and him, we pretty much have the weirdest relationship where we agree on everything, but we disagree in between on everything.
Yeah.
Pretty much. So I just wanted to get you on just to talk about this article, because I feel like it's relevant to where the Rockets are at right now, and a lot of the angst and good and whether positive or negative remarks that are being made about the team. I think this is a kind of something that can let some light on it, and I think we're going to have opposing views, but I'm curious to see. I just wanted to talk about it and see maybe we can meet somewhere in the middle. But what I'm going to do for this, a little different. So I'm going to kind of go through some of the highlights of the article, and then we're going to chop it up about it. First thing in the article, you point out the issues that are going on with the fan base right now, with the pitchforks and kind of the general anxiety about the team's direction. Just in general, what is your feeling on the Rockets right now? Like, where are you at?
I feel good. Reason being, I always anticipated like a pretty extreme tank job, and I honestly thought that this year the tank was almost more important than ever, because this is the draft, right? Like, this is the draft, and so I am happy to be likely securing the best possible odds in the best possible draft, and so like I understand that it's stressful, it looks bad, national media is clowning us, all that stuff, but to me, we're right on track. I've always said that the plan was meant to culminate next year, so I'm not going to dedicate stress and anxiety to anything until next year. Next year, I might be, the preeminent source of gloom and doom in our little online social circle, but right now I feel good.
Yeah, and I think you pointed that out in the article where you said next year everything changes. The Rockets owe their pick to Oklahoma City, that's top 4 protected. You can't gamble with those, so you basically have no incentive. So, and this kind of kicks us off into the article about flipping the switch, where we differ. And I share your big, broad picture view. I think where our biggest difference is the way we view in between time. I do put stock into development, and not like you don't, but the process in between from getting from point A to B. And even though we're a quote unquote tanking team, I still think that there are certain measures and markers that you want to see from them. And, you pointed out some different teams that were able to flip switches. And, first on the article, you see the Boston Celtics one, which you admit is a little bit of an outlier due to the fact of their team's makeup. And, they had a lot of vets, and it was just adding literally like Hall of Famers to the team to really pick that up for them. So we'll skip that. One I did want to touch on briefly. So the 04-05 Phoenix Suns, the Steve Nash edition to the 62 for them to win 62 games. Now, I looked into that team. Now, there was a lot more than just Steve Nash going on. And in context of that team, one of the things that I've noticed is as the teams that flip switches, they fall into 2 categories. And we'll get into this more as we talk about the teams that are more aligned with the Rockets. Category 1 is that they were only bad for an outlier reason. Most of them the year before were already a playoff team or near playoff team. So it's like you'll have these blips where something happens, a player gets traded or injured, they drop, then bang, they're winning, 19 games, and next year they're back in the playoffs. Maybe they make a trade for a good guy. So I put the Suns in that category. I'll put the Spurs in that category, and I possibly the Nets in that category as well, because it's really more of a lot of veterans and a lot of kind of really, because tanking wasn't even a philosophy in the long-term sense. Teams have been tanking forever. It wasn't a philosophical view. But from you, you pointed out the main teams that you want to touch on is Philly and OKC. So kind of lay your case out, or you can go back and if I missed something, but I want to hear what the corollaries were for you. But go ahead.
Okay, well, so it's so just to be comprehensive, the examples of the Suns and the Celtics to a lesser extent, to me are only relevant if Harden comes back, and then the Celtics example, right, only becomes relevant if Harden comes back and we trade for a veteran, because as we've discussed a lot, like there are two scenarios where Harden comes back. Maybe Harden comes back to lead the kids, and that to me is like, we'll probably be a play-in team, maybe an 8 seed, right? But then there's also this scenario where Harden comes back and we trade for Karl Anthony Towns or Pascal Siakam or Jimmy Butler, in which case, yeah, I think one of those like Celtics Suns turnarounds becomes kind of feasible, but I kind of just don't probably think that's going to happen if I had to guess what's going to happen. So I would say that the Sixers and Thunder examples still are more relevant. Yeah.
I'm glad you clarified that, because that is where we do agree. I think I've told you this before. To me, even though you think that's the unlikely, I think that's really what's going to happen, because it's the easiest way out of these things, is just infusing the team with veteran talent. And if you have the ability to do so, a lot of times that's what the teams will do. That's one path, and I think that path is very, very possible. I know, including myself, we've been ragging on the Rockets front office. At baseline, even one thing they have done is be able to take that path, and to me, that's competent to do that. Even though I see some incompetence in some of the other paths that they may be able to take. I think having the cap space, having the assets, and having the flexibility to be able to make those moves where you could receive a James Harden and possibly another star player does put them in line for that style of rebuild. So I will agree with you there. As pivoting over to the more long-term one that usually deals with young drafted talent becoming the guys that kind of help you out, and you add supplemental vets. This is where I think we disagree the most. My view on it, just fairly quickly. I look at our team and I look at our roster. I think we have talented players, but I don't think that the roster is conducive to helping them develop to the point where any realistic timetable for whether the GM, the coach, or the franchise, without having a pivot again, is really there. Just looking at some of the things that we're doing this year, I understand that a lot of people use the age thing. They're young. To me, that's more of a reason why you want to supplement some of the things that they'll need to be able to execute, not things that are gonna win 50 games or even 30 games. I mean, our team is bad enough that if we had a backup point guard, I don't see that making a big difference as far as us winning 5 more games. I don't think if we had a backup center that could actually play, I don't see that as much of a big difference. I just see that as being able to walk and chew bubblegum. And I feel like my view on as far as the roster construction, which to me is the most damning thing about the lack of awareness of our front office, is that it impacts the timeline, whether in a macro or even a short-term level, that these guys, you need them to be at certain places when you're ready to add a veteran in any avenue, even the Harden thing. I would like Jalen Green to be a more well-rounded player right now, play with some players that could complement his strengths well, so he knows where his spots are. I need him to learn all these things early, so when we're trying to go for it, he's more ready for that instead of me trying to teach him when I'm paying James Harden.
Yeah, that's fair. So for me, a lot of these issues kind of boil down to how the draft lottery plays out and decisions that the team can make about construction play out from there. But I will say this: I think that those flaws are deliberate because I think the front office intends on tanking like hard, man. Like we don't want to win 3 or 4 extra games because we've got a competent backup point guard. We don't want to be able to protect the rim because, like, I really think the front office feels like we have to maximize our chances of drafting Victor Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson, and because that's if we're so lucky, and it's a 27% chance of that happening for the worst team in the league, right? I tweeted this recently though, like if we land one of those guys, our future suddenly, to me, looks ridiculously bright. And I don't see a plan with better than 20% odds of giving us that future, Like, but this is where I think the major point of contention for you and I comes in is because you don't really believe that drafting Wembanyama or Henderson does as much for the team as I do, I think.
Possibly. I think if you draft Wemby for sure, nothing matters. So I'll agree with you there. Nothing matters. My view is I'm a pragmatist, and I just don't live in a world where I put if I own a business, I'm preparing for multiple outcomes at the same time. To me, I think people put too much stock into the probability of drafting a Wemby. Wemby, in theory, I mean, every team wants Wemby. Every team is tanking for Wemby. So there's only going to be one team that actually drafts Wemby. So for the other teams, to me, you have to be able to address multiple things at the same time. That's why rebuilding is hard. The teams that are competent in rebuilding is that you can still tank and still develop and still build a roster that's flexible and do all the things that you want to do while maintaining a healthy environment that's conducive for the growth for the guys that are on staff, the guys that are on your roster. So in the event that a Wemby does not become available, you're not just out there looking dumb. And that's really where I'm at. It's not, I guess yours is you're more optimistic. I'm not a pessimist, but I think being a realist makes you naturally more pessimistic. So that's how I see it with the Wemby thing.
What about Scoot Henderson, man? Because that moves the odds from 14% to 27%. So if you see Henderson as a franchise altering talent, the tank becomes more palatable, right? And I do personally.
For Scoot, obviously I think he's a really great player. I think the term generational is abused nowadays. I don't know if he's generational. I don't think he's a once in a lifetime prospect. You know what I mean? I think he's going to be a really, really, really good prospect. But when I think of generational, I'm thinking of Luka Doncic. And I just don't think Scoot is that. I mean, he's playing in a semi-professional league, and he's still putting up numbers that KPJ did in the G League. So I'm not like, I love his game overall as far as a talent. Obviously, he's going to be a great NBA player. He's a kid. He's already built like an adult, like a grown man. But to me, even, Wemby, obviously Wemby is Wemby. Let's put him in one category.
Yeah.
Scoot is more of a traditional number one pick in a year. You know what I mean? And to me, that is tempting. And that does lead to kind of getting back to the article. The teams that you discussed as the most closest analogs to the Rockets, the Philly and OKC. And looking at Philly, I'm just gonna kind of look at some stuff that I had noticed about their roster. For them, and when they were starting with their tank, quote unquote, their team was very, very similar to ours. A lot of young guys, a lot of rookies. I think in 2013-14, they had looks like 9 rookies on the roster, and they had 6 first-year players and 3 second-year players. So this is the start, and they didn't become a good team, quote unquote, until 2017-18 when Joel Embiid and they drafted Ben Simmons. Joel Embiid's first full season. Now, James, one thing I know you pointed out the Philly. If Joel didn't get hurt, bro, they were on pace to win 34 games that year.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
So
they would have made that gradual turnaround, essentially.
Yeah, and that's this leads me to my biggest. This is my point, and I agree with you. In theory, my biggest point is and I think you may even agree with this. In order, both teams, OKC and Philly, one thing that they had were the guys. The biggest question mark for the Rockets right now: do we have a guy?
Oh, I completely agree, but to me that's even more incentive, right? To tank in a sense, because there are two guys at the top of this draft that look like, okay, let me backtrack a little. I agree with you that the word generational is thrown around too often, right? I'm not willing to call Scoot Henderson generational. He's maybe on the cusp of like being a generational guard prospect, but as an overall NBA prospect, no. And even still, we throw the word around too much. Like Wemby is a generational prospect, right? But I do think he looks certainly like a potential franchise player, right? Every franchise player is not generational, right? I'm sure we could agree to that. Like Jason Tatum is probably not a generational player, but he's good enough to lead the team to the finals. So there's a semantic distinction to make there. But yeah, I think I like a lot of the young guys on the Rockets for sure. But it's not obvious to me that we have a franchise player. I'm not 100% sure that Jalen or Jabari can be that. So that's why I'm like, we got to get that guy, and so the hope is we give ourselves 27% chance of landing that guy in this draft. And if not, I don't know, maybe Eamon Thompson's the guy, or otherwise we've got to figure something else out. Another thing I think about is this. It's like, if suppose this summer we get the 4th overall pick, right? 5th overall pick, something like that. And then we can't attract any free agents. Harden stays in Philly, Miles Turner goes to the Lakers, and we just can't, we don't get anything going, right? Yeah, we're in a lot of trouble for sure. Like that's a really bad outcome, and suddenly the future of the rebuild is very concerning. But I don't see a plan that doesn't have a worst case scenario. You know what I mean? So to me, this was the plan, and those are the odds, and we're playing them.
I've, like I said, in theory, that if that outcome was the only outcome that would yield the results we wanted, I would fully agree with you. But once again, my thing is that in the rebuild, there's multiple types of rebuilds and there's multiple paths you could take. And I think by them not emphasizing, just assuming that you may not even have that opportunity, like you said, I don't want to have to think about it after the fact. To me, if I was a prudent GM, I try to cover all the bases as much as I can. That means put a lot of stock into development and letting the guys develop in a system that is conducive to their game and what I envision for them to be. And putting players around them that can help them do that while allowing them to learn and grow and lose, which is what you can still do in your tanking and trying to get the Wembys, so that even if you don't get a Wemby, you still have a team that's ready to keep growing and you can just keep moving in that direction, or you can then, add other players and supplement some of their weaknesses and try to build like that. I think what the Rockets have done through the roster construction, and a lot of it does deal with two pivotal positions: offensively, the guard play, and defensively, the rim protection. Those are, as we know, the most impactful, probably the most impactful on winning. So I understand that, but to not have that at all on a team is throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because I feel like, one, the guard play part, the defense not so much. I mean, you can the collective between Garuba, Sengun, and Bruno, whatever, the Rockets aren't going to be a great defense anyway. You don't want them to be a great defense. But the reason I put a lot of emphasis on the guard play and the development of it, because to me the guard play actually is a part of development. Because you are drafting players like a Jabari Smith Jr., you're drafting players like an Alperen Sengun, you're drafting players like a Jalen Green that need to learn how to play in a efficient offense that's smooth, that makes sense, that they can take mental notes of how to do things the right way. And I think that in not providing some of those reps with competent people, it does slow their development. And that's a cost that if you don't get Scoot or Wemby and you do get a 4th pick or 5th pick, and it's another young prospect that you're going to bring in, you're really going to be starting from scratch. And with that, and I just feel like, so basically it's looking like the odds of the rebuild being successful through that avenue, which is the draft, is the odds of you getting a Wemby or a Scoot. And that just closes that, which to me, if you pick twice like they have, that's not a good look to me. That's just how I look at it.
Let me touch on that. The only Okay, so we're the 2nd pick in the 2021 draft, right? It was going to be Jalen or Evan Mobley. A lot of people would have taken Evan Mobley, myself included, to be completely honest. But from what I'm seeing from Evan Mobley in Cleveland, I don't think he's gonna be the best player on a championship team either. Do you?
Not right now, no.
Right? Because he's an incredible defender, but I don't think he's gonna ever develop the offensive game to be like this is our best player and we just won the NBA championship. I think he's gonna be the second best player on a championship caliber team. So we didn't really have the opportunity to get that guy in the 21 draft, unless Jalen ends up being that guy. But if I'm being completely honest, I think Jalen also looks more like the second best player on a championship team, which is an awfully high bar for what it's worth. Like the second best player on a championship team is probably a top 20, 25 player. So people take that as a diss, and I'm just saying I don't think Jalen Green's going to win MVP. Like that, I don't personally see that as much of a slight.
Real quick, not to derail you, are you concerned about his play?
Yeah, I'm starting to get a little bit concerned. How about yeah, a little bit. But I think it just points to me the recent developments point to like the kid is probably not going to be one of the best players in the world. It's like one of the very best, like a top 5 player. You know, it's expected that a Bradley Beal, Devin Booker caliber guard is going to struggle with efficiency in their sophomore year, right? And that's a perfectly good outcome for a number 2 pick to be as good as like Devin Booker. So that's the future I envision for him. That's a hell of a player, and I'm glad we have him. But most guys that go on to like really dominate the league, like your Lucas and etc., with the exception of late bloomers like Jokic and Giannis, right? Because but most lottery picks that go on to be MVP candidates are better than this by now. There's no denying that, So concerned to that extent, yes. Going back, we had the 3rd pick in the 2022 draft, right? Had the Magic actually taken Bari and we had taken Banchero, I would probably have different feelings by now because Banchero looks like a guy that could be that guy that leads you to the finals, right? Like, so if we'd had that opportunity, I'd be saying, yo, let's go out and get a rim protecting big man and a real point guard and like start cooking. But we didn't. We got Bari. And I'm really, really excited about Bari, but I don't think he's going to be a top 5-ish player either. So like I just don't think we have that dude, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that is um the way I see it. I think Jalen, like you said, he can be a top 15 player in the league. I don't know about top 5. The reason I don't know about top 5 is just because I think those archetypes now are guys that dictate everything in the game, and he's just not in that category yet. Maybe he does. Maybe he does. Maybe in the future on a different system. To me, my biggest, just to touch on his thing, my biggest fear for him right now is what I'm seeing on the defensive side and his effort. I think that's a mentality thing. I don't like some of the kind of body language stuff that I'm seeing on second efforts and things like that. He's young, and once again, it leads me back to my main point of having people that can hold him accountable for that. Because I know one of the things that he was touted on coming into the draft was the fact that he was a tireless worker. Like that's his work ethic, and you can tell he has a very strong work ethic because the leaps he's made in certain parts of his game over the summer, or even from in season to from start to the end of the season, are very noticeable. So I think the sky's the limit for him. So it's going to be hard to assess. But if you get a rep as somebody that's lazy or you really don't care about defense and things like that, then that really sticks with a lot of players, and it does impact their perception of what they are. So I am worried about that for him. I think a lot of the influences on the team aren't great for him right now either.
Yeah.
So once again, bets. As far as like, yeah, I don't know. I can't look at any of the players on the roster and be like, this is Kevin Durant.
No.
Or this is Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid, when he played, was averaging like 20 and 11 as like a rookie and a sophomore. Like that was Kevin Durant in his 30 was averaging 30 on very, very elite efficiency. So I think you look at those talents, those prospects on those OKC teams. One of the things I think is a prerequisite for pivoting is adding players to a player, and this will touch on something that I kind of hinted at for you with the trade that we made with the James Harden thing. I think one of the things that I had an issue with is the fact that we didn't get a player back. I know everybody is, the picks are great. I'm not. It's still early, and there's still about maybe 4 or 5 opportunities for that to yield some really good results. But the standard for, once again, for pivoting is having something to pivot as a base. whether it's a Kevin Durant on your roster, whether it's a Joel Embiid on your roster, whether even in the Suns to a lesser extent, they had Amari Stoudemire, who won Rookie of the Year, for that 04-05 that brought Nash in. There were some of the guys that were able to supplement. And that's why I always thought that why I think the most likely outcome for the team to even contend as early as next season, even if James Harden comes, they would have to not only bring in James Harden, probably bring in another B-level player, and then overall the entire, pretty much the bench. Half the roster will probably be cleaned out. And at that point, I mean, where does that, to me, long term for that's not a rebuild. It's almost like a semi-rebuild.
Yeah.
I mean, you still have your picks, but it's like a pause on the rebuild because then you could pivot on later on down the line. But it's kind of a cop out, and a little, and to me. But I know you may disagree with that.
Well, okay, let me address a few things. First of all, I see 3 scenarios where we can make a big pivot, right? Draft Wemby, draft Scoot, sign Harden, right? Draft Wemby, I think, can lead to a pivot because I think this kid is the type of kid that, like, he's going to be an impact player as a rookie. I think that generally speaking throughout history, like the best players, the best players of all time impact as a rookie. Like LeBron James was a good above average NBA player as a rookie, right? So if Wenbanyama is what people think he could be, and to my eye, I suspect he will be, then I actually think he can be an impact player as a rookie, and coupled with some good veteran signings and stuff, I think we can make a pivot, right? Henderson, I think we can make a pivot because I think that he just unlocks a lot of what this team is missing. I know you're not going to love this, but I have a feeling that if we draft Scoot Henderson, we move on from Sengun because I don't think that they're a good pairing. So I think we get a rim protector in. And so then now we have a point guard and a rim protector. So that's like both fundamental issues solved at the same time. And then again, get a couple of solid veterans in. I think the team's looking a lot more functional all of a sudden, right? Like just from a complete roster construction perspective. And then the hard moves, obvious. Like if we bring Harden in, no matter how that looks, we're surely going to bring another player in along with them. Like wouldn't shock me if we got a Clint Capella reunion. To be honest, something like that. There's a few possibilities, but that's obvious. We would pivot because we're bringing in like a star veteran and maybe 2. I'm not. And I hint at this in the article, but I could understand if I'm a little misleading on it. But I'm not suggesting that the Rockets are likely to make one of the biggest turnarounds in NBA history either, right? Yeah, like we're not going to win 50 games next year. I know that, but like 35-40, I think is not out of the question, and like, again, it depends on how everything unfolds. I'm not sure if I deviated from your original question, but yeah.
No, I mean, I let me take back something I said. It would be on brand for the rebuild to do all those avenues. I said it would be a cop out. Thinking about it, it's not really a cop out because ultimately, and I think this is me getting away from what I hate when people do because they do it with the draft. Ultimately, the point of a rebuild is asset accumulation and using that to build a competitive roster by hook or crook. It could be through drafting, could be through free agent, it could be by trade, whatever. As long as you have enough assets to be able to be opportunistic to make that move and it's there, then yeah, you're rebuilding. Some people do it in a year. They just get, okay, I have enough assets. I got this guy. I have some trades. Let me move in. We were good last year. We sucked this year. Now we're going to be good again. So let me take that back. The 3 avenues. I guess my preference, honestly, just because I like the dynastic approach, because the Harden approach is not the dynastic approach. That's the we're just gonna get back into it approach. Usually, the teams that the Warriors, the Spurs, the ones that even the OKC to a lesser extent until they broke that up. The ones that yield those types of teams are ones that are built solely on the backs of your draft picks, and that is still once again, it's still on the table. Like I said, if you draft Wemby, all bets are like nothing matters because it doesn't matter if Silas is here for another 3 years. You could always fire him, Firestone, Tillman, sell the team. You still have Wemby, and a better coach is going to come in and do something good with him because he's there. So I guess just to your point, you did say the likelihood of this happening is not. I want to ask you, what is you said like what you think is going to happen. Ideally, I said mine is ideal is the young guys being developed, trained, being good enough to win. You add another young guy, a couple of vets, they start winning. What is your ideal like in a perfect world for James? How would you like this rebuild to go, and on what route? Which of those routes?
Yeah, same route for sure. Build around the guys that we drafted. Just generally does tend to lend itself to more like sustained success, right? I guess I think that it's possible to primarily build around the guys that we drafted and have a big swing in wins in 2023-24, right? Like I could see a world where those things coexist. Not a 30 win swing, but like a 10 or 15 win swing, you know? If we can get the right group together and like attract the right veterans.
I know one of the things you pointed out in the article is the coaching situation and how that impacts as well. Now, you've seen some of the Houston media is starting to turn the heat up a little bit on Coach Silas. Obviously, he had him getting injected in the New Orleans game. The post game conferences, him expressing that there's frustration across the team, in the coaches' room, and in different aspects of the organization and the fan base. You can see the stress in his face. He tried to, they even went as far as to bench Jabari Smith Jr. in the Utah game to try to secure a win-win tape return. Do you think is it a prerequisite that the Rockets have to move on from Coach Silas, or are you willing to give him another season next year? Even if you draft Wemby, would you like to see him play under Coach Silas?
No, I wouldn't, to be honest with you. Yeah, so I mean, I've been softer on Silas than a lot of people, as I have not been really on board with like the Silas needs to be fired movement per se, but now it kind of feels like he needs to be fired. And honestly, it sucks because I really don't think it's his fault. And I think that he was dealt a really difficult hand. I'm not sure how many young guys could do much of a better job than he's done, or like I think it's really overstated how poor he's been. But I'm just not a fan of delaying the inevitable in anything, I think generally speaking, the longer you delay the inevitable, the more consequences there are. And it's just like he's already gone, man. Like he's got the worst coaching record in NBA history now. It's just it's not gonna last. History tells us this is not going to work. The Rockets are going to have a new coach. So it's like, what are we waiting for,
Yeah, it is. It's pretty much. I mean, it was set to me. It was set in stone once the Harden thing fell through,
Yeah.
and it was just a matter of time. And I don't know. Obviously, I've spoken of some of the all the stuff I hint to as far as the things that are wrong with the team to me are personnel issues, and that falls on Stone himself. And for me, for Raphael Stone, this next off season, hell, this trade deadline, all of this stuff is really going to be able to show people, and he can show people what he's made of, because Coach Silas has been the punching bag for the past 2.5 years for a lot that's gone wrong with the team. And I think people are starting to wise up to, okay, like, yeah, we can see some of the issues now, like not having a point guard in games where you are trying to win. It is really, really glaring. This leads to the Kevin Porter Jr. thing, and the experiment with him and them thinking he's the franchise player. And all of that is that falls on the front office and the GM. So I think for Stone, even though he's been skating by, not being scrutinized by the fan base, I feel like it is a bit unfair to Steven Silas to be like the punching bag and the poster boy for everything that's wrong with the Rockets. And I do want the fan base to be able to understand. I've been hard on him. I wasn't on the fire Silas thing because I really don't like advocating for other grown men to lose their job, because that's how they feed their children. But to me, at this point, like you said, it's like this is it's going to happen, and it's going to happen. And honestly, he didn't help himself. Some of the stuff he's done as a coach have been questionable, and I think that for him, he may get another opportunity, he may not. As a head coach, I know he's going to have an assistant job at some point in time, but yeah, they need to really just kind of start thinking about what the outlook for this team is now that they're going to be serious. And the first coach is never the one to make it. And I think Stone has one more coach to hire before he's the next one gone, because that's usually how it goes. Yes. So, the article once again is called the Can the Rockets turn this thing around? And, If you guys want to read the article, go down to the description, click it. James, what we're going to try to do is when you write some of these articles, I'll try to get you in so we can just talk through them, because I really enjoy a lot of I already told you my favorite writer in the Rockets kingdom. I really enjoy a lot of the perspective you bring on different things. And I appreciate that we can talk about things and not be like have vitriol about it and things like that. That's very much needed right now in the
Very
fan
much
base.
appreciate you, man. Honestly, I feel like we're both the types. It's funny because we seem to either really agree or really disagree on everything, but we're also just both personality types. So like we're like the anti Skip and Shannon, we're just like I don't have it in me, man. Like I don't like to yell, like I yell like once a year and I hate it. Like it's you know what I mean? So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, appreciate that. And my thing is just, there's honestly, you swayed me on stuff. You've told me I've swayed you on stuff. Obviously, we're all just fans. We're just trying to learn and assess information as it comes in. And, I'm not going to be just stuck on something, especially things that some of the results are going to be in the future. But once again, appreciate you for coming on. Y'all check out the article. Y'all check out all of his work that he does. You can follow him on Twitter at James Piercey 11. That's at James Piercey 11. He's one of our great Chop Shop contributors. And brother, appreciate the time.
Appreciate you, man.